I demand justice because this cannot stay like this. He must pay for all the suffering we are going through, our family." These desperate words were spoken by Maria de Los Angeles Romero, mother of Magdalena Aguilar Romero, a 28-year-old nutritionist who was brutally murdered in a case that shocked Mexico. The crime was committed by her ex-husband, Cesar Gomez, and his mother, Sylvia Arciniega, in one of the most atrocious acts recorded in the country. Magdalena's body was found dismembered, parts were cooked in a pot, others placed in plastic bags, and the rest frozen. Magdalena was born into a simple and loving home in the state of Guerrero, Mexico. Her life was shaped early on by her family's dedication. Her father, Diego Aguilar Zamora, worked as a miner, a traditional and arduous profession in the region. Her mother, Maria de Los Angeles Romero, devoted herself to caring for the children. Magdalena grew up in a humble environment imbued with values that inspired her to dream of making a difference. Isn't it fascinating how modest beginnings often fuel the greatest aspirations? From an early age, Magdalena showed an unshakable desire to become a successful professional. She didn't just want to succeed for herself, but also to help her family, repaying her parents' sacrifices for her and her siblings. It makes us wonder, how often do we neglect the dreams we've carried since childhood? Magdalena's vision is a reminder that even the most distant dreams can serve as a compass for our journey. As a teenager, she remained steadfast in her goal to study nutrition, a choice that reflected her concern for people's well-being as well as her commitment to health and quality of life. After all, how often do we choose careers solely for status or financial gain? Magdalena teaches us that a purpose-driven choice is far more powerful and transformative. Magdalena's life began to take shape when she completed high school and entered university to study nutrition. Her classmates described her as someone always optimistic, the kind of person who had something positive to say even on the toughest days. Isn't it amazing how one person's positivity can influence an entire environment? This is something we can all apply to our lives, being a source of light for those around us. However, life has mysterious ways of testing the most genuine dreams. During her college years, Magdalena met Cesar Gomez, a man 14 years older than her. At first, he seemed like a good partner, and their relationship started with promises of love and partnership. This union, however, would become the starting point of one of the darkest chapters in her life. Have you ever reflected on how some people enter our lives as tests disguised as opportunities? Magdalena was young, full of dreams, and believed in love. She decided to give the relationship a chance. Before long, what seemed like a romance turned into a rushed marriage marked by the arrival of 2 children. Though happy with motherhood, the marriage began to demand sacrifices that pulled her away from her goals. Do we sometimes lose ourselves trying to balance dreams and responsibilities? This is a valuable reflection for us all. Over time, the once vibrant and lively young woman began to feel suffocated. Her desire to continue studying clashed with Cesar's demands as he gradually revealed a controlling side. For Magdalena, giving up her career was unthinkable. How do we cope when our dreams seem to collide with the demands of a relationship? This question invites us to consider our priorities in our own lives. At the beginning, Cesar seemed like the ideal partner. He showed interest in Magdalena's life, claimed to admire her, and appeared to support her dreams. It's interesting how, in many stories, a person's true character only emerges over time. Cesar's behavior changed shortly after they married, revealing a controlling and possessive side that had been hidden. This reminds us that a person's true nature often reveals itself in everyday situations. Cesar began imposing small restrictions, always justifying them as acts of care or love. He didn't want Magdalena to dress up too much, avoided her going out to see friends, or even studying. The isolation started gradually but soon became constant. Have you noticed how small restrictions can grow into a prison? Magdalena's case warns us about the importance of recognizing the early signs of control in any relationship. Gradually, Cesar dictated all of Magdalena's choices. She stopped visiting her parents frequently, drifted away from friends, and skipped family events. The excuses were always the same: she was busy or tired. These reasons often masked the fear of disobeying her husband. How often in our lives do we accept limitations out of fear of confronting uncomfortable situations? Psychological violence escalated, and Cesar's control became evident to Magdalena's family. He even forbade her from visiting her own brother because of his sexual orientation, revealing his prejudice and manipulative nature. The toxicity of their relationship lay not only in his control, but also in how he justified his actions with discriminatory and absurd arguments. This situation serves as a warning: never normalize abusive behavior. Over time, Magdalena began to fade. The optimistic and vibrant young woman was replaced by someone worn down, with no energy to dress up or socialize. Cesar took from her not only her freedom, but also her self-esteem and joy for life. It makes us ponder, how far do we allow others to impact our sense of identity? Magdalena's story is a stark example of how abuse can destroy someone's essence if not confronted. Despite warnings from her family, Magdalena insisted everything was fine. She claimed her marriage was happy, but her actions said otherwise. How do we handle situations when someone close to us cannot see they're in an abusive relationship? This teaches us that support must often be continuous, even when the person seems unwilling to accept it. The situation became unsustainable, and after 3 years of abuse, Magdalena found the courage to leave Cesar. This decision was an act of resistance and courage, showing that even in the most difficult situations, it is possible to find the strength to seek freedom. Her story inspires us to reflect on how the courage to change can transform our lives and give us a chance to start anew. When Magdalena decided to leave Cesar and return to her parents' home, it was as if she had rediscovered a part of herself that had been lost. Her family welcomed her and her children with relief and happiness, knowing they had seen the signs that something was wrong in her marriage. This decision was more than just a return to her family; it was an act of resistance against years of oppression. It makes us reflect. In difficult times, family can often be the safe harbor that helps us rebuild our identity. Magdalena began to rebuild her life with admirable determination. She returned to her nutrition studies, re-enrolled in college, and immersed herself in her professional goals. This was a process of rediscovery. The young woman who had slowly faded away was now re-emerging, stronger and more determined than ever. Her story teaches us that it is never too late to start over, even when the path seems filled with obstacles. How many times do we postpone our dreams out of fear of failure? During this period, her family's support was crucial. While Magdalena focused on her studies and work, her parents and siblings cared for her children and ensured she had the help she needed. This is a powerful example of how communal support can transform lives. Perhaps, in our own journeys, we can also be the support system for someone who needs help to rise again. Have you ever considered how small gestures can have immeasurable impacts? In addition to her family's support, Magdalena received assistance from local organizations that dealt with domestic violence cases. They identified her case as high risk and provided psychological and legal guidance. This reminds us that resources and support networks are available, though they are often underpublicized or overlooked by authorities. In your opinion, how important is it to promote these networks to reach those in need? During this period of recovery, Magdalena began to reclaim parts of herself that had been left behind. She started wearing makeup again, going out with friends, and dedicating time to reading and exercising. It was as though each small act was a reminder of her newly regained freedom. These simple gestures demonstrate the power of self-care in restoring confidence and joy in life. This is something we can apply in our own lives, paying attention to ourselves, even in difficult times. However, even with her evident progress, the shadow of Cesar still loomed over her life. He did not take the separation well and continued trying to interfere with her freedom. Magdalena knew she was living through a risky time, but determined to move forward, she refused to let fear paralyze her. Her courage is an example of how confronting adversity with determination can be a transformative act. Have you ever wondered how you face your own fears? For the next 3 years, Magdalena flourished once more. She graduated as a nutritionist, became a loving mother, and a dedicated professional. Her story is a powerful lesson in resilience and overcoming challenges, showing that even after years of abuse, it is possible to rebuild a full and meaningful life. From Magdalena, we can learn that no matter how difficult the past may have been, there is always the possibility of a brighter future if we have the courage to pursue it. It was a seemingly ordinary Saturday, January 13th, 2018, when Magdalena said goodbye to her mother before leaving home. She mentioned she had a consultation at the local health center and would then pick up her children, who were in Cesar's care under the shared custody arrangement. The farewell was full of normality, like any other day. But it's striking to think about how seemingly ordinary moments can be the last. Have you ever reflected on how much we value our daily goodbyes? Everything seemed to go as planned that day. Magdalena completed her consultations and, at the agreed time, went to the meeting point to pick up her children. However, Cesar did not show up, and attempts to contact him were unsuccessful. This was the first sign that something was wrong. Magdalena decided to go to his house, a natural step any mother would take to ensure her children's safety. Have you ever stopped to think about how we rely on instinct in such critical moments? That was the last time Magdalena was seen alive. Her mother, Maria, waited anxiously at the church where they had planned to meet for a mass in honor of Magdalena's great-grandmother. When she didn't appear, Maria began sending messages and making calls, but there was no response. At first, she tried to stay calm, thinking something minor, like a dead phone battery, was causing the delay. How many times do we rationalize concerns to avoid panicking? The next morning, the worry turned into palpable fear. Maria went to Cesar's house looking for answers, but both he and his mother claimed Magdalena had left around 10 p.m. to meet a friend. Their justification didn't seem plausible, especially given Magdalena's responsible nature when it came to her children. Something was wrong, and Maria's instincts told her not to trust their story. How would you react in a situation where everything points to an imminent danger? As days passed, concern turned to desperation. The family launched intensive searches, spreading photos of Magdalena on social media and throughout the streets of Tosca. The community mobilized quickly, but it seemed no one had any information about the young woman's whereabouts. The authorities' slow response only heightened everyone's anguish. This episode makes us reflect on the importance of solidarity during crises. How often do we see communities band together to demand justice, even when the system fails? Finally, 9 days after her disappearance, the brutal truth came to light. Magdalena's body was found in Cesar's business premises, dismembered, with some parts cooked and others frozen. The discovery shocked the nation and brought to light the unimaginable cruelty of the crime. This revelation was not only devastating for the family, but also for a society already scarred by violence against women. How do we cope with a reality that seems crueler than any fiction? The confirmation of Magdalena's fate devastated her family and spurred even greater community mobilization. The case drew national attention, and the voices demanding justice grew louder. Amid their grief, Maria and her family found the strength to transform their pain into a fight, demanding answers and action from the authorities. Magdalena became another name in a heartbreakingly long list of women killed by violence, but her story would resonate as a symbol of resistance. The discovery of Magdalena's body was not just a moment of pain for her family, but also the beginning of an unrelenting fight for justice. Maria de Los Angeles, her mother, led this movement despite being shattered by her loss. She knew that the authorities' inertia had already cost dearly, and swift action was necessary to prevent the perpetrators from escaping. This makes us ponder, how often does the system only respond when pressured? Maria's story is a powerful reminder that, even in pain, determination can move mountains. The initial demonstrations began at Magdalena's funeral. Friends, family members, and residents from the region attended not only to say their goodbyes, but also to demand that the authorities take action. The streets were filled with posters and cries for justice. This type of mobilization exemplifies the power of collective action. Have you ever thought about how, united, we can bring about change even in the most challenging circumstances? The pressure from society prompted the police to intensify their investigations, but Cesar had already fled with the help of his mother, Sylvia. She, however, was captured and brought to trial. During the investigation, it was revealed that Magdalena's 2 children had witnessed the crime, a detail that infuriated the public even more. How can one confront a cruelty that affects even children? This is a difficult question but essential to understand the profound impact of this case on public consciousness. Sylvia was the first to receive her sentence, 40 years in prison. This verdict brought some relief to Magdalena's family, but Cesar's absence loomed like a shadow. He was the primary perpetrator of the crime, and his freedom meant that justice was still incomplete. This situation reminds us how frustrating it is when only part of the truth is uncovered. Have you ever experienced the feeling of incomplete relief, as if one missing piece still held everything together? The years that followed were marked by an incessant search for Cesar. A reward was offered for his capture, and his image was widely publicized, including internationally, with the help of Interpol. Meanwhile, Magdalena's family continued to live with the pain of their loss and the trauma endured by her children. These young boys, who had lost their mother in such a cruel way, faced a long journey of healing. This makes us wonder, how can we help those who bear such deep scars? In 2022, after 4 years on the run, Cesar was finally captured in the city of Tijuana. He was living under a false identity but was recognized by local authorities. His capture was a moment of relief for Magdalena's family, but the path to a final sentence was still long and exhausting. This delay makes us question, why is justice so slow in cases that should be prioritized? Perhaps it's a call to demand more efficient systems. Even after his capture, Cesar's trial faced numerous delays. He used every possible strategy to prolong the process, including frequently changing his lawyers. This behavior not only extended the family's suffering, but also exposed the flaws in the judicial system. Cesar's story and his resistance to facing the consequences of his actions is a clear example of how justice can be manipulated by those who fear it. As a society, are we prepared to deal with such obstacles? In November 2023, 5 years after the crime, Cesar was sentenced to 55 years in prison. For Magdalena's family, this sentence was a moment of relief and proof that their fight had been worthwhile. While the pain of their loss would never disappear, knowing the perpetrators were punished brought some sense of justice. This prompts us to reflect, is justice, even when delayed, enough to heal the wounds left by tragedies like this? Magdalena's case has had an impact far beyond her family. It has become a symbol in the fight against gender violence in Mexico, a country with alarmingly high rates of femicide. Her name is now mentioned alongside other women who lost their lives under similar circumstances. This constant remembrance serves as a way to keep the message alive that change is urgently needed. Have you reflected on how individual stories can inspire societal transformations? Magdalena's children now live with their maternal grandparents and uncles, surrounded by love and protection. Despite all the care, the trauma they carry is profound. The memories of that horrible day still haunt them, and both remain in psychological treatment. This reminds us that the impact of violence extends beyond the direct victim, affecting future generations. Are we, as a society, prepared to address these traumas and offer the necessary support? Magdalena's story also highlighted the urgent need for improvements in systems designed to protect women in Mexico. Despite seeking help and being classified as a high-risk case, the authorities failed to protect her. Her tragedy serves as a warning about the need for more effective action. In your experience, have you ever felt that systems meant to protect have failed? How can we, as individuals, work to demand meaningful change? Even with all the adversities, the strength of her family stands as a testament to human resilience. They have turned their pain into a cause, joining feminist movements and organizations supporting victims of violence. Their fight is not only for Magdalena but for all women facing similar situations. This solidarity is a powerful example of how pain can be channeled into something greater. How do you think you can contribute to causes seeking justice and equality? Magdalena's case remains a somber but necessary reminder of how much progress is still needed. Violence against women is not just an individual problem, it reflects societal structures that must be challenged and transformed. Her story inspires us to question, demand, and act. Isn't it interesting how some stories, even the most tragic, can awaken a collective force? When reflecting on Magdalena's legacy, it becomes clear that it is much greater than the tragedy she endured. Her memory now lives on through the actions of those fighting for a fairer world. Her story serves as a reminder that every life has an impact, and even in pain, we can find purpose. How can you use the lessons from this story to bring about change in your own life and in the lives of those around you?